We're going to begin with breaking news out of Beijing, where the Chinese Foreign Ministry says it regrets what it called a civilian balloon straying into U.S. airspace. Beijing says it's a civilian object meant for scientific research. The Pentagon had early called it a spy balloon and was tracking the balloon flying over the state of Montana. Kimberly Halkett is joining us live now from the White House. This has had the U.S. under great tension over the last couple of days. What is going to happen now? What more do we know?
Well, according to the Pentagon, what we know is that the U.S. government has been tracking this very carefully. What we understand is that this is a high-altitude surveillance balloon. It was first spotted over the U.S. state of Montana. This is close to the Canadian border. It was spotted by people on the ground who were wondering what was in the sky. That is how the U.S. government first learned about this, incredibly. And it was then that the U.S. government started tracking it. Now, there are going to have to be some answers as to why it was bystanders that first spotted this and not the military or the U.S. government. Having said all of that, the U.S. government now watching it very closely, assuring the public that this is not in any way in commercial airspace. In other words, meaning that it's not going to come in contact with any passenger jets or any sort of commercial air traffic. It's much higher. Now, what is it doing? It's intelligence gathering. And the concern is that it is flying over some very sensitive areas, particularly what we know to be 3 nuclear missile silo fields. Now, according to the Pentagon, as soon as the U.S. government was aware that this was taking place in terms of the intelligence gathering, that the sensitive data was protected so that the foreign state actor, in this case China, was not able to collect any of the sensitive data.
The timing of this, of course, is inconvenient, perhaps more so for the U.S. because the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is expected to be heading to Beijing in a few days with talks with President Xi. Even if this is just a weather balloon, this puts a lot of the leverage, if you like, on China's side, doesn't it? It has unsettled the U.S. over the last couple of days.
The tensions between the U.S. and China have been escalating for some time, not just during the tenure of the U.S. President Joe Biden, but they've been ratcheting up under the presidency of Donald Trump. There were sanctions that were put in place, or rather tariffs that were put in place, very strict trade tariffs. And as well, there have been very tense words that have been put in place. And we should point out, when it comes to those trade tariffs, those were not dropped on the part of Joe Biden. And so there have been very tense exchanges that have taken place. Well, we've heard Joe Biden talking about his strong relationship with the Chinese government. We also know that there has been backdoor espionage that the U.S. has accused the Chinese government of being responsible for decades. And so this is sort of an ongoing concern of the United States, that this is just, in the case of this balloon, well, it is kind of a low-tech version of intelligence gathering. Most of the means of intelligence gathering tends to be more in the form of satellite, as well as other forms of high-tech intelligence gathering. Still, this is one of the concerns of the United States government, is that there is this ongoing collection that's taking place on the part of China, and that's why there continues to be this hypervigilance on the part of the United States government to continue to not only monitor this, but to try and avert it.
Kimberly, thank you very much indeed. That's Kimberly Halkett bringing us up to date from the White House. Let's go to Katrina Yu. She's joining us on Skype from Beijing. So this is a statement that's been made by the Chinese government. Earlier on, a few hours ago, they were being pretty cautious and they were saying, no, let's just wait and see what unfolds. And now they've, as I say, issued this statement. What is it that's going on there at the moment? What are they saying?
The That's right. As you mentioned during the afternoon briefing at the foreign ministry, at that point, they did not confirm or deny that this was a Chinese ship, that this was a surveillance aircraft. But now we do have a statement from Beijing saying that it is indeed a Chinese vessel, but they are saying that it is not military, that it is not surveillance, but in fact, it's what they've called a civilian airship, which is designed for civilian research purposes, essentially, to collect weather information. Now, they said that this aircraft has limited self-steering capacity, and due to a strong westerly wind, it blew unintentionally over U.S. territory, and this was definitely not planned or not the intention, and this just occurred, according to China, due to this force majeure, and this was not planned or any sort of strategic move on Beijing's part. At least that's what they're saying. They said it deviated far from course, and Beijing is sending out a remorseful message saying that they regret that this has happened. It seems to be highly embarrassing for China if this is the case, and that they're working with the U.S. side to manage this situation. And I think they're scrambling. They're hoping that this doesn't get out of hand.
And that's important, as we were talking to Kimberly just a moment ago about the fact that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to Beijing. And there was a point during the last couple of days when this started to emerge that people started to think those meetings were not going to be easy at all. But if China is responding as you're suggesting, then perhaps this is an effort to try and get things back on track ahead of that meeting.
That's right. I think this is coming also at a time where we've seen from China less of a strident, aggressive tone when it comes to communicating with the U.S. and more of a conciliatory tone. This has certainly been the case for the last few weeks, especially leading up to this meeting. The U.S. side itself has said that the whole point of Blinken's visit to China, the highest-ranking official to visit China since the beginning of the pandemic, was to set guardrails to avoid any major points of dispute spiraling out of control and escalating into some uncontrollable conflict or becoming something that can't be controlled by either government. And so China has been quite coy. It hasn't confirmed this meeting officially, but it has said that they're working with the U.S. side. And certainly for China, they are wanting to reach out and work not only with the U.S., but also other U.S. allies. We've had China's diplomats working with, for example, Australia, having meetings there. China at the moment has just reopened from COVID. Its economy is slowing. It's really keen to welcome foreign investment and put on a more friendly face. But at the same time, we've got these meetings coming, and Antony Blinken, should he come to China and have these meetings, there is a long list of disputes, everything ranging from potential clashes over the South China Sea, the status of Taiwan, tech controls from the U.S. imposed on China and Chinese companies. So already we have a very tense list of talking points, and no doubt this aircraft, be it a surveillance ship or a weather balloon, essentially, this is only going to add and complicate those matters when the two sides sit down, if they do sit down and continue those meetings on Sunday.
Katrina Yu in Beijing, thank you. The European Union's